When it comes to versatile martial-based classes in D&D 5e, you can do no better than a fighter. They sport the ability to wear any type of armor with ease, and use every kind of weapon they can get their hands on, as well as having the potential to make many attacks in a single turn. So, in this video, we'll be going over some of the best magic items to consider taking as a fighter to get the most use out of their versatile playstyle. And starting off at number 10, we have the Bracers of Archery from the DMG. These bracers require you to attune to them before gaining the benefit of adding a +2 bonus to your damage rolls made with longbows and short bows. This bonus might not seem like much on paper, but it does eventually add up, considering how many attacks a fighter can do in a single turn. At 5th level, they can make 2 attacks like most other martials, but at 11th and 20th level, they gain 3 and 4 attacks respectively. Combine that with their ability to use Action Surge at 2nd level to take the attack action, or any other action for that matter, with a second charge of it at 17th level, you're looking at a sizable increase in how much extra damage you can deal in a single round. Combine these bracers with something like Sharpshooter for an extra +10 damage, and you're dealing so much more extra damage before even rolling your attack dice for the turn. This is a simple magic item that serves one purpose, and it serves it well, especially for the earlier parts of a campaign where damage numbers are on the lower side. However, the Bracers of Archery only take the number 10 spot on this list, despite its usefulness because of how restrictive they are. Firstly, you can only use them when paired with a longbow or shortbow, so you can't even gain extra crossbow or gun damage. And secondly, because they're restricted to 2 ranged weapons, this means you are restricted to a dexterity-based build if you want to get the most use of these bracers. So while these bracers are pretty good, they only cater to a very specific build, which you definitely would want as a ranged attacking fighter. But for any other kind of build, you're much better off with something else entirely. And covering the number 9 spot on this list is a 2-way tie between the Cloak of Protection and the Ring of Protection from the DMG. Both of these items require you to attune to them while also granting the wearer the same benefit of adding +1 to your AC and saving throws while wearing them. The only difference between these two items are their rarities, with the cloak being an uncommon item while the ring is considered rare. That being said, being able to gain a flat bonus to your defense is always a good effect to have, as you're sure to find out when you start acquiring a +1 or a +2 weapon and armor. And there's no better feeling than stacking bonuses up to the wazoo until you achieve the big number to satisfy your monkey brain. After all, who doesn't want to play Paladin with 27 in their AC? This holds especially true for the Cloak and Ring of Protection because you can definitely stack both items for a +2 bonus to AC and saving throws, making for a very strong AC, higher than what it would normally be. Stack this with some +3 full plate mail and you're looking at a 23 AC at minimum. Having better saving throws is also really good since these bonuses synergize well with the fighter's Indomitable feature, which allows you to reroll a failed save, which can give you an extra chance to succeed instead, especially if all you needed was that 1 extra or 2 points to succeed without the ring and cloak. Unfortunately, that's where the fun stops for these magic items. While stacking AC and saving throw bonuses is nice to do, at higher levels, these bonuses are a bit minuscule compared to the varying amounts of magic items you gain access to. Not only that, but these items also take an attunement slot for each one that you want to wear, which might not be worth sacrificing 2 slots for when all you're getting is a +2 bonus to AC and saves. However, just because there are plenty of better items, there is no discounting the potential future usefulness of AC stacking in this game, since the game is balanced around creatures having a slow rise in power than in other tabletop games, meaning every single extra point of AC can really add up in comparison, which is why these 2 items are considered useful enough to take the number 9 spot on this list. And crashing in at number 8, we have Wave, a legendary trident from the DMG. This sentient weapon requires attunement before you can use its amazing effect, which involves having a +3 bonus to attack and damage rolls, as well as the ability to force a creature to take necrotic damage equal to half of the target's maximum number of hit points whenever you score a critical hit with it, making this one of the most efficient boss killers in the entire game. Along with that, the weapon also acts as a trident of fish command, a magic item that contains 3 charges of Dominate Beast, with the added caveat that the beast must have an innate swim speed, and regains 1d3 charges every day at dawn. Wave also acts as a weapon of warning, making it so that you and your companions within 30 feet of you can't be surprised unless you or the creatures affected by this are incapacitated by something other than non-magical sleep. You also have advantage on initiative rolls, which is a very powerful effect on a weapon like Wave, since the sooner you go, the sooner you can end your fight by landing 2 crits and insta-killing the enemy Tarrasque or an aspect of Tiamat. You can also create the benefits of a cap of water breathing at will to let you breathe underwater if you can believe it. You can also use the weapon as a cube of force by choosing the effect you want to use rather than pressing a side of the cube. When you do so, an invisible barrier is erected that contains different effects based on how many charges you use and which face you would have pressed if you had the actual cube with you. As for the sentient being that resides within the legendary item, it's neutral in alignment and has an intelligence score of 14, a wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 18. It also possesses the ability to hear and has dark vision out to a range of 120 feet. It can also communicate with its wielder telepathically and can speak, read, and understand Aquan. This goes hand in hand with its ability to speak with aquatic animals as if it were using the speak with animals spells, with the unique benefit of allowing the wielder to also listen in on the conversation. As you can see, there are a lot of little flavorful benefits you can get from just this one magic item alone, which would make Wave a very powerful weapon to add to your arsenal. Having a +3 to all your attack and damage rolls while also having the potential to outright 2-shot any creature in the game that doesn't resist or outright nullify necrotic damage is just straight up overpowered. And having this weapon on a fighter that can make up to 4 attacks per turn is just straight up overkill at that point. And that's not to mention the 2 times you can action surge when you reach that high of a level, considering the fact that Wave is indeed a legendary weapon, so you most likely won't obtain it until super late game anyway. Combo this with a champion fighter that can crit on 18s, 19s, and 20s on an attack roll starting at 15th level, and you basically win D&D altogether. But despite how powerful this weapon actually is, there are 2 major reasons as to why Wave only takes number 8 on this list. The first is the fact that it's extremely restrictive in regards to who can attune to it in the first place. To attune to Wave, you have to be someone that worships a god of the sea, which might not be something your character might do as a fighter unless you specifically built your character around such a restriction. Perhaps they were a sailor that was rescued while stranded at sea and they thought it was the work of one of the gods of the sea or something. Or maybe you were just a cleric whose deity is one of the sea gods. Either way, having to build your character around being able to use an item that you may or may not get at a level that most campaigns don't even get to in the first place doesn't really seem all that worth it when you have so many other options for magic items that are easily more accessible. Which leads into the second reason why this legendary weapon can't be any higher on this list. Because even if you do obtain Wave, you are essentially bound to its will. You see, Wave wants to convert mortals to worship one or more sea gods and is extremely zealous about it. It may get upset or even outright refuse to work with you if you do anything that doesn't further its objective in the world. But there may be a way to fix it. Wave sometimes doubts its own nature and purpose, secretly believing that it was created to kill one specific sea god, despite its overzealous nature and devotion to the gods of the sea. So perhaps this can all be part of a side quest to make Wave not as zealous and try to convert mortals to the will of the sea gods. Be that as it may, however, as it stands, Wave is incredibly powerful and might even be the strongest weapon in the entire game, were it not for the amount of investment needed to actually use it in the first place. Now, on top of needing a character that worships a god of the sea, you also need to be able to reach a high enough level to start obtaining legendary weapons in the first place, which is pretty difficult when campaigns typically end much earlier than you would be able to get it. But if you do manage to get it, then have as much fun as you can slaughtering all that stands in your path in the name of your sea god, and forcing your DM to start running a lot more necrotic immune enemies just to try and balance your lust for blood. And at number 7 are items like the Belt of Giant Strength and the Manual of Gainful Exercise, as well as its dexterous counterpart, Manual of Quickness of Action, all from the DMG. Essentially, any magic item that increases your stats outright would technically fit into this category, but we'll be focusing more on the items mentioned since they have the most impact on fighters. But first, let's start with the biggest of the bunch, the Belts of the Giant Strength. There are different variants of these incredible belts, all of which set your strength score to a set number, starting with the rare Belt of Hill Giant Strength, setting it to 21, all the way up to the legendary Storm Giant variant, which sets your strength score to a whopping 29. This is obviously most beneficial to any kind of melee-based fighter, since a higher strength score means better bonuses to your attack and damage rolls whenever you swing, as well as better chances to succeed strength saving throws and pass skill checks which rely on strength, such as athletics, or even becoming better at grappling and shoving. The only real downside of these belts, however, is the fact that while it can be used with range-based fighters to shore up some of their skills and whatnot, you'd be better off using something else if you're going to be a ranged attacker. The other reason is the fact that, because it sets your strength score to a specific number, It can actually shut down other options you might have worked hard for, such as the Manual of Gainful Exercise, which we'll talk about now, along with the Manual of Quickness of Action. Manuals and tomes are consumable magic items which increase a specific stat permanently by 2 after spending a total of 48 hours over a period of 6 days studying them, with manuals increasing physical stats while tomes increase mental stats. This also increases the maximum amount of points you can have in that stat by up to 2 as well. So if you're already at 20 strength, reading the Manual of Gainful Exercise will allow you to have 22 strength. Or if you only have 18, you can then have 20 after studying the manual, while taking another 2 points of strength whenever you gain your next ability score increase. This comes back to why the Belt of Giant Strength might conflict with your Manual of Gainful Exercise, since the belts override whatever your strength stat is, unless your strength stat is naturally higher in the first place. That being said, even having a 22 strength is more than enough to get you through a full campaign regardless, which is why both this item and its dexterity counterpart take the same spot on this list as the belts of the Giant Strength, since they achieve the same goal of hitting harder. Of course, we should also talk about the differences between the Manual of Gainful Exercise and the Manual of Quickness of Action before moving on by addressing the overall usefulness of having more dex. For starters, just like with strength, more dexterity grants ranged fighters better attack and damage rolls with their ranged weapons, and finesse ones if they're using them, as well as increasing your odds of succeeding dex saves and pass skill checks based on dex. Dexterity also increases your overall AC if you're wearing less than heavy armor, and also your initiative, which improves your turn order in combat. And because dexterity most certainly isn't strength, you could also have your ranged fighter with 22 dexterity wear a belt of Hill Giant Strength to also have an almost equally as scary strength stat for no other reason than to show off, or just so you can have better strength saves and strength-based skill checks. Either way, whichever item here works for you will, of course, be dependent on what kind of character you're planning to run, as they both have their equal shares of upsides and downsides. And casting away the number 6 spot on this list is the Ring of Spell Storing from the DMG. This rare magic item allows a spellcaster to store some of their spells into the ring for later use by either the caster themselves or another creature that attunes to it. You can store up to 5 levels worth of spells at any one time. So 1 3rd level and 1 2nd level spell, or 5 1st level spells, or a single 5th level spell, or any other combination thereof, so long as the level of the combined spells equals 5. When first obtained, the ring also contains 1d6 minus 1 levels of stored spells chosen by the DM, which can then be replaced or used as necessary. What's amazing about this ring is the fact that any creature can cast a spell inside of it to store the spell, even if another creature is attuned to it. It also grants creatures like fighters the ability to cast some very useful and powerful spells that they otherwise wouldn't be able to, such as a fireball or haste. What's nice about casting spells with spell save DCs or spell attack rolls in general, however, is the fact that they use the DC and modifiers of the caster that stored the spell in the first place, so no having to settle for a low save DC fireball as a fighter. Another common use you might use the Ring of Spell Storing for is to give them 5 shield spells that they can use their reaction on against incoming attacks to bump up their AC by a spectacular +5 bonus until the start of their next turn. For this reason, a Ring of Spell Storing might not be a bad thing to give to a party's Eldritch Knight, since they already have access to spells like Shield and Armor of Agathis to begin with. You can even upcast Armor of Agathis to 5th level for a free 20 temporary hit point shield that hurts melee attackers whenever you have it up for 20 cold damage per hit as a free once per day thing you can do once you reach 19th level. Either way, as long as you have any kind of spellcaster in your party, the Ring of Spell Storing is an amazing tool that every fighter can benefit from. The only downside is that the usefulness and flexibility of this item largely depends on who was in your party to begin with. But most fighters can work with anything they're given, like the aforementioned shield spell, or even an emergency Misty Step or 2 to get out of danger or close the gap to an enemy. This relies heavily on what kind of spellcasters are in your party, however, and that's why the Ring of Spell Storing can't be any higher on this list. And slithering into number 5 on this list is the Serpent Scale Armor from Candlekeep Mysteries. All this armor does is act as normal scale mail, but comes with the useful benefit of being medium armor while not being bogged down by medium armor's rules and regulations. While medium armor tends to be limited in how much of your dexterity can be added to your armor's AC, the Serpent Scale Armor has no such restriction. So you can add your entire +5 dexterity modifier, assuming you have it, granting you a total of 19 AC, since Scale Mail normally only has 14 AC to begin with. As good as this armor is, Why does it take number 5 on this list though? Well, to put how good the Serpent scale armor is compared to other armors, a normal studded leather armor is the best light armor you can get, and grants you a 12 AC plus your dexterity mod, which would be 17 with the +5 bonus to your dex. In order to achieve a 19 AC, you have to upgrade your studded leather armor into a +2 studded leather, which is considered very rare, while Serpent scale armor is only considered uncommon, and therefore much easier to obtain. And if you think the downside of wearing the Serpent scale mail is that it shares the disadvantage on stealth checks clause, then think again, as the Serpent scale mail specifically gets rid of you needing to make stealth checks with disadvantage. In short, for all intents and purposes, the Serpent scale mail is light armor that isn't actually light armor, and is probably the best light armor you can have in the entire game. As a dexterity-based fighter, you would want this armor as soon as possible, and you'd want to wear it for as long as possible. That being said, like with all of the entries on this list, the Serpent scale mail really only benefits dexterity-based fighters rather than strength-based ones. It is important, however, to not overlook the fact that this set of armor is only uncommon, meaning it's not actually that hard to find or even make, especially if your DM allows Candlekeep Mysteries content in their campaign. In short, both the rarity and how strong the armor is for when you're allowed to get it are what makes it strong enough to take a higher spot on this list. But can't be any higher since it does benefit one type of fighter more than the others. And slicing through the number 4 on this list is the Sword of Cass from the DMG. This artifact longsword was once wielded by Vecna's evil and ruthless lieutenant, Cass the Bloody-Handed, until he eventually grew strong enough to slay Vecna, but not before being doomed himself by his former master, leaving Cass's sword behind as a result. As for what it does, the sword grants a +3 bonus to damage and attack rolls made with it, and can crit on a 19 or 20 on a d20 roll. Additionally, the sword also deals an extra 2d10 slashing damage to undead creatures. You also gain the ability to add 1d10 to your initiative at the start of combat, as well as the ability to transfer some or all of the attack bonus of the Sword of Cass onto the AC whenever you attack with it. No action required, and lasts until the start of your next turn. So you can trade your +3 attack bonus for a +2 AC and a +1 attack bonus instead, for example. Finally, you get 1 casting per day of Call Lightning, Divine Word, and Finger of Death, with Call Lightning and Finger of Death having a save DC of 18. All of these benefits are extremely useful for a fighter. More initiative means you get to kill things sooner. The ability to trade your attack bonus for AC, more damage to undead, a higher critical hit rate, and the ability to cast some pretty decent spells once per day all grant the fighter a much needed boost to their versatility as a class. Not only that, but the sword also comes with 2 beneficial properties, 1 minor and 1 major, which are rolled or chosen by random by your DM. The minor benefits can range to things as small as a free proficiency in a skill of the DM's choice, to being able to cast a 3rd level spell that the DM gets to choose once per day unless you roll a 6 on a d6 after casting it. As for the major benefits, you have properties such as increasing a random ability score by 2 to a max of 20, 1d6 hit points of regeneration at the start of each of your turns, the ability to deal an extra 1d6 damage of the weapon's type every time you hit with it, to casting higher level spells, to outright being immune to blinded, deafened, petrified, or stunned. These properties alone may or may not make the Sword of Cass worth taking, as they can provide some unique utility for your fighter by granting them an extra 4d6 damage at 20th level due to having 4 attacks per turn. Or you could end up with the ability to cast haste on yourself or an ally at a minimum once per day, which comes with some of the best benefits you can get for a 3rd level spell, such as extra AC, another action to attack, dash, disengage, or use an object, and double movement speed. However, this being the sword of Vecna's former right-hand man, there are a few downsides to wielding the weapon. The first downside involves the flip side of the beneficial properties, detrimental properties. As with the beneficial properties, the sword comes with 1 minor and 1 major detrimental property. Minor detrimental properties are a bit more varied and plentiful, but can range to mundane effects like your weight dropping 1d4 times 5 pounds, to as detrimental as having disadvantage on all saving throws against spells. Meanwhile, major detrimental properties also have a wider variety of effects that can make or break your opinion on this weapon. Some effects are as small as taking medium 4d10 to heavy 8d10 psychic damage the first time you attune to the artifact, to losing the ability to speak, to outright having vulnerability to all damage. And those are just the mechanically simple properties too. There are some properties that are downright weird or even mean, such as a death slad being imprisoned within the artifact, with each time you use the artifact's properties as an action, giving it a 10% chance of escaping, appearing within 15 feet of you and attacking you. Or a 10% chance of an avatar of a god that wants to take the artifact away from you that comes with the stat block of an Imperium, a huge celestial with a challenge rating of 23 to wrest the artifact away. And if all of that isn't bad enough, the Sword of Kos also comes with the inherent need to be bathed in blood within 1 minute of being drawn from its scabbard. If it isn't, the wielder is subject to a DC 15 Charisma saving throw, taking 3d6 psychic damage if they succeed, which is nothing compared to what happens when you fail. Upon failing your Charisma save, the wielder becomes dominated by the sword, as if being affected by the Dominate Monster spell, where the creature will be forced to bathe the sword in blood, which could very well mean attacking your friends to fulfill the sword's demand. Once the sword is bathed in blood, however, all becomes normal as the wielder no longer is being dominated by the sword. As you may have guessed, the sword is also sentient, being a chaotic evil sword with an intelligence score of 15, a wisdom of 13, and a charisma of 16, while also possessing hearing and dark vision out to a range of 120 feet. The sword can also communicate telepathically with its wielder and can speak, read, and understand common. Despite being chaotic evil, however, the sword does have a thirst for blood against any and all associated or dominated by Vecna, including Vecna himself. However, this blood desire slowly becomes a fixation for the wielder as well, which can make for some very interesting roleplay should the wielder fall victim to the sword's desire. All that being said, the reason why the Sword of Kos can't be any higher on this list is because while the effects of this weapon are incredible, there is a very good chance the sword might be unusable for a fighter simply because of the detrimental effects that can come with it. The wielder might not want to have a -2 penalty to their strength score while attuned to it, or might not want to take double damage from everything just for the other benefits of the Sword of Kos. The fact is, there is just too much randomness between the beneficial and detrimental effects that can come with the weapon to make it worth considering as being among the best magic items you can take as a fighter. It would be another story if the artifact only came with beneficial effects, since you can usually bathe the sword in blood within 1 minute anyway, since the only time you'd be taking the sword out is during combat. However, the Sword of Kos does grant enough powerful benefits that it gets to sit at around the number 4 spot on this list. And at number 3, we have the Winged Boots from the DMG. This is an uncommon magical item which grants you the ability to fly while attuned to him. It comes with a total of 4 hours of fly speed that you can use however you want, with each use taking a minimum of 1 minute from the duration. So if you use the boots to fly for 1 round in combat, which lasts for 6 seconds, you still take away 1 minute from your winged boots' total duration, at which point you may as well stay in the air for as many turns as possible. And with such a high duration, you may as well have infinite flying, since you most likely wouldn't even be using them throughout the day unless you have a problem staying on the ground. Even so, for every 12 hours you don't use the boots, they regain 2 hours of flying capability, which is an extremely generous amount of recharge for an uncommon item. That being said, the winged boots are amazing for all types of fighters, since flying allows melee-based fighters to reach creatures on higher ground or bypass certain barriers altogether, while range-based fighters can stay out of range of other melee attackers by staying up in the air, while pelting arrows and crossbow bolts from a safe distance above. Flying also allows you to close large gaps with ease and even avoid ground-based traps by just not being on the ground to begin with. While flying alone is enough to place the winged boots at a higher spot on this list, the fact that they're also considered an uncommon tier item pushes them to the number 3 spot on the list, since the boots are technically easy to access at lower tiers of play, although your DM could say otherwise, of course. And at number 2, we have the animated shield from the DMG. This is a very rare tier shield which acts as a normal shield, but comes with the benefit of animating whenever you speak its command word as a bonus action. Once you do, the shield hovers in your space, granting you an AC bonus without actually having to hold it. This basically means that you can have the biggest weapons in your arsenal, like a greatsword or a great axe, while also maintaining the +2 AC bonus from your shield, which is never a bad thing. Likewise, a range attacker can just use the animated shield for bonus AC while using a bow or other range weapons that don't normally allow for them to use a shield. Either way, the animated shield is just a strictly beneficial tool for a fighter to have in their arsenal, as extra protection is important at higher tiers of play, especially if you want to live your dream as a glorious AC tank. And since the animated effect doesn't come with a charge system of any kind, you can just have the shield animate every minute in the moment leading up to the combat that you might be anticipating. Overall, the animated shield is a great item to use for fighters, since it benefits every kind of fighter equally by freeing your hands to wreak havoc upon your enemies with your massive weapon of choice, earning it the number 2 spot on the list. And at number 1, we have the Cloak of Displacement from the DMG. While wearing and attuned to this rare cloak, attack rolls made against you have disadvantage. This is a very simple, yet deceptively effective effect, which can easily skewer combats in your favor, especially since melee-based fighters want to be in the face of combat at all times so they can get the most in for their many attacks per round. The cloak minimizes the risk of being a frontline fighter by ensuring that most creatures have a minimal chance to score any kind of hit against you. That's not to say the cloak doesn't benefit for range fighters either. Being a fighter that relies on dexterity and can take many shots from a long distance can very well make you a priority target, since you can more easily pick off guys than, say, a ranger could. So having a Cloak of Displacement can help even a range fighter from being a priority pick against charging melee attackers or other range attackers in general. And for a rare item, the Cloak of Displacement isn't exactly hard to get a hold of either, since rare items can start becoming available as soon as you reach 5th level. However, given how powerful the effect of the cloak is, be prepared to pay a pretty penny for one, or even see it much later in the campaign than other rare items. That being said, the Cloak of Displacement isn't invincible or unbeatable. Whenever you take any damage, become incapacitated, or have your movement restricted in any way by getting stunned, grappled, restricted, etc., you temporarily lose the displacement effect of the cloak until the start of your next turn. So if you're caught in the blast radius of a Shatter, Burning Hands, or any other spell that requires a saving throw that still takes damage even if you succeed, then you just don't have the cloak to protect you for that round. Regardless, that is a small price to pay for having your DM plan their encounters around the cloak to begin with, since the Cloak of Displacement has such a huge warping effect in certain campaigns, which is why it takes number 1 spot on this list.